Hello, and welcome back to Ebon Whisper. Before we begin, feel free to leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I love reading every single one. If you enjoy chilling tales that speak in the Ebon Whisper, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Now, get comfortable, dim the lights if you dare, relax your mind, let the outside world fade away, and let's begin. Story 1. When I was a kid, my teacher gave our class a project where we had to interview someone in our family. We were supposed to choose someone older than us and ask them questions about their life. Since my grandma was the oldest person I knew, choosing her seemed obvious. The teacher gave us a worksheet with most of the questions already written down. They were simple questions, which made sense because we were only in 5th grade. What did you do for work? What is your favorite childhood memory? What was your favorite subject in school? Things like that. At the bottom of the worksheet were 3 empty spaces where we were allowed to write our own questions. I remember being much more excited about the assignment than I probably should have been. I wanted the interview to feel professional. On the day we recorded it, I wore what I considered my best suit. It wasn't really a suit. It was just a clean collared shirt and one of my dad's ties hanging loosely around my neck. The tie was much too long for me, but I thought it made me look important. My grandpa took the whole thing seriously, too. He moved 2 kitchen chairs into the dining room and placed them across from each other, like we were sitting in a television studio. Then he set up his video camera on a tripod so the entire interview could be recorded. At the time, I had a huge crush on Graham Alexander, the weather guy from Action 64 News. I watched him almost every evening. I loved the confident way he spoke while pointing at maps and weather systems, so naturally I decided that was how a real interviewer was supposed to sound. The video still makes me laugh when I watch it. There I am, 10 years old, sitting too straight in a kitchen chair with a tie hanging halfway down my body, trying desperately to sound like a television reporter. "Now, Janice," I said, putting on the deepest and most serious voice I could manage, "I understand that you are retired. Is that correct?" My grandma smiled at me. "I sure am," she said. "For 10 years now." I nodded slowly, like she had just revealed something incredibly important. "Amazing," I said. "Just amazing." "And before that, what was your career?" "I worked as a nurse at St. Michael's Children's Hospital." She reached toward the table and took a drink from the mug of milk I had prepared for her before the interview. "Wow," I said. "That must have been fun. And was this profitable for you?" That made her laugh. It was the kind of laugh adults make when a child says something unintentionally funny. "Oh, heavens no," she said. "Luckily, your grandpa was a hotshot lawyer and made plenty enough money for both of us." From somewhere outside the camera frame, my grandpa shouted, "Objection." My grandma laughed even harder. Whenever I watch that part now, it makes my chest hurt a little. You can see it clearly in her face. She loved him. Not in some dramatic movie way. It was something quieter. Something built over decades of meals, arguments, bad jokes, children, bills, funerals, birthdays, and mornings together. They really loved each other. I continued through the list my teacher had given me. Favorite childhood memory. Favorite school subject. First job. Favorite vacation. I was still doing my best Graham Alexander impression, but as I got closer to the bottom of the page, I became nervous. Even through the old video, you can see the change in me. I stopped smiling as much. I start tapping my shoe against the floor. My fingers move repeatedly over the edge of the worksheet. Because I knew what I had written in those 3 blank spaces. Everyone knew there were certain things you weren't supposed to talk about too much. The endless were one of them. Talking about them wasn't illegal. It wasn't even completely forbidden. It was just something adults avoided. Children learned that very quickly. You might ask your parents something about their endless and receive a short answer, followed by an immediate change of subject. Teachers avoided discussing them unless it became absolutely necessary. Television programs sometimes mentioned them, but always carefully. People did not like discussing death when death was standing somewhere in the distance looking directly at them. Still, I had questions. Who else was I supposed to ask? My grandma had been alive longer than anyone I knew. She remembered the world before the endless. So I looked down at the first question I had written. When I spoke again, the fake television voice disappeared completely. Grandma? Yes? Do you remember when the Reapers first showed up? In the recording, you can hear my grandpa choke on his lemonade from the next room. My grandma's smile vanished. Her eyes moved away from me and settled on the far corner of the dining room. For several seconds, she said nothing. Then she picked up her mug and slowly drank some milk. I remember realizing immediately that I had crossed some invisible line. Finally, she put the mug down. She cleared her throat. Evan, she said gently, we don't call them Reapers in this house. I looked down. Sorry, they're called the Endless. I nodded. Then she took a slow breath. And yes, she said, I remember when the Endless first announced their presence. I sat up straighter. I hadn't expected her to answer. Were you scared? Her eyes moved from me to the china cabinet beside the wall. Everyone was scared. She paused again. You don't remember a time without your endless, she said. For you, they've always existed. But before they appeared, life was different. I watched her carefully. We didn't have them watching us, she continued. If you were alone, you were really alone. Truly alone. You've never experienced that. That idea was almost impossible for me to understand. Even as a child, I could not imagine a world without them. Everyone had an endless. You didn't always know what yours looked like right away, but eventually, you discovered it. Some were frightening. Some looked ordinary. Some appeared far away. Some were close. They were always there. Waiting, watching, Grandma rubbed her thumb slowly against the side of the mug. When they first appeared, people didn't know what to do, she said. Some pretended they couldn't see them. They thought maybe ignoring them would make them disappear. Did it? No. What did people do? Some tried running toward theirs. I frowned. Why? To see what they were. She gave me a sad little smile. But no matter how fast people ran toward their endless, they never got closer. Never? Not unless the endless wanted to get closer. The way she said it made my stomach feel strange. The president made a statement about a week after they appeared. She continued. He suggested the Russians might have created some kind of gas that made people hallucinate. I remember almost laughing at that. Even as a child, it sounded ridiculous. Grandma apparently agreed. No one believed him, she said. How could one gas make every person on Earth hallucinate at exactly the same time? She leaned slightly forward, and by then, stories were already spreading. What stories? Her eyes went back toward the china cabinet. Stories about people dying. I stopped moving. People started noticing that their endless were getting closer before they died. I stared at her. How much closer? It depended. I could hear the old clock in the hallway. Tick, tick, tick. Some only moved a little, she said. Others moved very quickly. Then she became quieter. Some people noticed. I knew what she meant. Some people watched death approaching them. In the video, I start fidgeting badly at that point. I pull at my sleeves. I look toward the camera. I glance toward the doorway where Grandpa is sitting somewhere out of sight. I obviously wanted the interview to end, but I also wanted answers. No adult had ever spoken so openly about the beginning of the endless before. So I asked the next question. What does yours look like? Grandma inhaled slowly. Mine is a balloon. I blinked. A balloon? One of those mylar balloons you see near the checkout aisles at grocery stores. What color? Yellow, she smiled faintly. It has a smiley face on it. I remember relaxing slightly. That didn't sound scary. Then she added, it says congratulations, across the front. Even now, as an adult, hearing her say that sends a chill through me. Her endless wasn't some monster covered in teeth. It wasn't a shadow. It wasn't a skeleton. It was something cheerful, something you would buy for a birthday, graduation, or new baby. A yellow balloon with a smiling face. Congratulations. And yet, it was still death. My childhood self looked down at the floor. The worksheet had been forgotten on the table. One final question remained. A tear rolled down my cheek. How close is it? Grandma looked toward the wall beside her china cabinet, just by the light switch there. She pointed. The cabinet had been built by my grandpa long before they married. It held Grandma's best porcelain dishes, the ones we were never allowed to touch. Her endless was standing beside it, or floating beside it, only a few feet away. I couldn't see anything there. Only she could. The recording continues for a little longer. None of us speaks. Then, the video ends because the camera ran out of storage. My grandma died 4 months later. She went to sleep one night and never woke up. I have watched that recording more times than I can count. Even now. Especially now. My phone returns to the camera roll when the video ends. For several seconds, I stare at Grandma's frozen face on the screen. Then I place the phone on the passenger seat. My car engine hums quietly around me. The headlights shine over miles of empty desert. Nothing moves in front of me. No buildings, no traffic, no streetlights, only pale dirt, scattered rocks, and darkness beyond the reach of my headlights. I turn the key. The engine dies. The headlights disappear. For a moment, everything becomes completely dark. I reach down beside my feet and search for the trunk release. My fingers slide across plastic until I find the latch. I pull it. The trunk opens behind me with a heavy click. I step outside. The evening air is cool. This has been my life for the last 3 weeks. Camping in the desert. Driving into town during the day whenever I need food, water, or supplies. Sleeping wherever police won't bother me. Returning here after sunset. I walk around to the trunk and reach inside. My hand finds the canvas bag immediately. By now, setting up the telescope has become almost automatic. I unfold the tripod, press the legs deep into the dirt, check that everything is stable, attach the telescope, adjust the mount. Night after night, I have repeated the process. When I was a kid, discovering the shape of your endless was almost like a rite of passage. Children talked about it constantly. There was even an app where people posted descriptions and drawings of their endless. Before I discovered mine, I spent hours reading other people's posts. Some were horrifying. A woman described a creature as tall as a building, standing far beyond the horizon. Someone else saw a man with no face. Another person described an enormous animal crawling through distant fields. But some endless were completely ordinary. A tree, a television, a street lamp. One person claimed theirs was a red plastic cup. My grandma had her smiling balloon. I was almost 8 years old before I realized that other people could not see the stars I saw. To me, they had always been there. At night, there were the normal stars that everyone could see. But during the daytime, another set appeared. Mine, thousands of deep red points scattered throughout the bright blue sky. They were dimmer than ordinary stars, but still visible to me. They even had their own constellations. I believed everyone could see them. I never understood why nobody talked about them. Then one day, in 8th grade, I casually mentioned the daytime stars to a teacher. She froze. A few minutes later, she told me I could sit in the corner and read instead of going to gym class. I didn't mind. I hated running. I loved reading. I thought I had gotten lucky. Then both my parents appeared at the classroom door. They had bags of fast food with them and huge smiles on their faces. My teacher spoke quietly with them before sending me home. I still remember the drive. Mom kept talking. Dad kept smiling. But whenever he thought I wasn't looking, his face changed. He looked terrified. That was the day we understood what my endless was. The red stars. The whole sky. At first, I thought it was incredible. I was proud of it. Other kids had single objects or creatures. I had the heavens. I spent hours drawing maps of my constellations. I gave them names. My bedroom ceiling eventually became completely covered in papers taped together, each page filled with red crayon dots. Later, when I got older, I replaced the drawings with plastic glow in the dark stars. I stuck them across the ceiling using little pieces of putty. I loved my endless. Maybe that sounds strange. But as a child, it made me feel special. It was something only I could see. Something enormous. Something beautiful. The sky belonged to me. Years passed. I became an adult. The stars remained. They changed slowly over time. They seemed larger, or maybe closer. That's how the endless worked. Eventually, they approached. But mine had always seemed impossibly distant. That made me feel safe. I ended up working at Dealmart. It wasn't where I imagined myself ending up when I was younger, but life doesn't usually care about childhood plans. One afternoon, I stepped outside during my break for a cigarette. As always, I looked up. My red stars shone faintly above me. Seeing them always brought relief. People found their endless terrifying. Mine comforted me. As long as those stars remained far away, I was alive. They were proof. Proof that death had not reached me yet. Then I noticed something. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. I rubbed them, looked away, looked back. Something was missing. One of my favorite constellations was called the Barman. It looked like a stick figure raising a glass for a toast. I had known that constellation since childhood. But now his glass was broken. 2 stars were missing. I stood outside Dealmart, staring upward until my break was long over. My heart pounded. I told myself there had to be some explanation. Clouds, sunlight, my eyes, anything. The next morning, another star was gone. Then, another. Over the next 2 weeks, the empty space grew. Every day, more stars vanished. I began waking up in panic. Before checking my phone, before using the bathroom, before doing anything else, I would rush to the nearest window and look outside. Fewer stars. Every morning, I started having panic attacks. I stopped going to work. After missing a week without properly explaining myself, Dealmart fired me. I didn't care. What good was a job if I was dying? I stayed awake as much as possible. I was terrified that if I slept, I would lose more time. My entire existence became watching the sky. By the second week, I had stopped showering. I barely ate. When hunger became unbearable, I opened cans of food and ate them cold. Heating them took time. Time mattered now. Eventually, only 3 stars remained. 3 out of thousands. I drove to the highest point in the city, hoping altitude would reveal more. It didn't. There were only 3. I watched them all night. I fought sleep until my eyes burned and my thoughts stopped making sense. Eventually, my body won. As I drifted into unconsciousness, I saw the final star disappear. After that, several days became difficult to remember. I slept randomly. I woke screaming. I wandered through my apartment. Sometimes I cried. Sometimes I laughed. Sometimes I sat completely still for hours. I started using drugs again. It was something I had left behind after college. Even back then, I'd always been afraid of taking too much. Now fear no longer seemed important. My endless was gone. My angel of death had abandoned me. That was how I thought about it. I wasn't relieved. I was terrified. If your endless disappeared entirely, what did that mean? Was I already dead? Was death so close that I could no longer see it? One night, I pushed myself too far. I don't remember every detail. I only remember drifting somewhere between consciousness and darkness. My body felt far away. I searched the blackness for something. Anything. I expected to find nothing. Instead, I saw her. One red point, almost invisible, far away. But there, a star. I cried. I don't know whether my eyes were actually open. I don't know whether what I saw was real, but I found her, and she showed me what I needed to do. After that, I became obsessed with dark skies. I searched online for places with as little artificial light as possible. That was how I discovered Amboy Crater. It was only around 4 hours from my apartment in Phoenix. I had already spent most of my remaining savings on a telescope that was far more expensive than I could afford. But rent didn't matter anymore. I had no job. I barely had money. Soon I wouldn't have the apartment either way. So I packed whatever I thought might be useful into my car. Clothes, water, food, blankets, the telescope. A few personal things. I left everything else behind. Before leaving Phoenix, I had one final stop to make. Now, 3 weeks later, I stand beside my telescope in the desert. Once everything is set up, I sit on the ground for a while. The heat stored in the earth during the day slowly fades. Night spreads across the desert. I've grown used to the sound here. Insects, small animals moving through distant brush, the occasional wind, the soft settling of sand and stone. Those sounds comfort me now. They have taken the place my endless once held. They tell me I am not completely alone. Tonight is unusually still. The air barely moves. I look toward the south. In the distance, a small campfire burns. Someone else is out here. I don't know who. A family, perhaps, friends, a couple, traveling through. I imagine them sitting around the fire talking. Maybe they are laughing. Maybe someone is telling a story. Maybe they're complaining about the cold. I silently wish them well. Then I return to the telescope. I aim it toward the moon first. A thin silver slice hangs in the darkness. I adjust the focus. Perfect. Then I move the telescope toward the coordinates I have been watching every night. The only place in the sky that matters anymore. I lean down, look through the eyepiece. There she is. My star. My red angel. Barely visible, impossibly distant, but real. I smile. For weeks I have experimented. Observed, calculated, not with real science perhaps, but with desperation. I had discovered a pattern. Somewhere back in my apartment, during those broken days after my stars vanished, I had realized something. The closer I came to death, the closer the endless became. Everyone knew that. My grandma knew that. The world knew it. But I had never understood what that could mean for someone whose endless was unimaginably far away. If I could move myself closer to death without crossing completely into it, perhaps I could bring the stars back. That was the idea. That was the code. Tonight, I believe I can bring her closer than ever. I walk back toward my car and sit in the driver's seat. My hands shake slightly, not from fear, from anticipation. I prepare myself the same way I have before. I don't think about what might happen. Thinking only makes things complicated. Afterward, my arm burns. Then the familiar buzzing begins. Warmth spreads through me. The world becomes softer around the edges. I leave the car carefully. Every step feels distant. The telescope waits where I left it. I bend down, look through the eyepiece. My breath catches. She's larger. The red star fills more of the view than before. Tears immediately run down my face. There you are, I whisper. I pull away from the telescope. For a second, I see only darkness. Then my eyes find her. A tiny red speck, visible without the telescope. Barely there, but unmistakable. My star has returned. I collapse onto the sand. The ground catches me gently. I know I'm crying, but the sensation seems far away. My body feels like something belonging to another person. Then, another red light appears in the sky. A second star. My lips part. A third appears. Then a fourth. My angels. My beautiful angels. Coming back. I laugh. Or maybe I sob. I can't tell anymore. More appear. 10, 20 hundreds the sky begins filling with them. Deep red lights burn against the darkness. Every constellation I knew as a child returns. The barman is there again. His glass is whole. I find shapes I haven't seen since I was 8 years old. The hunter, the broken crown, the longfish, the woman running. All of them. Home, my entire sky has come home. The stars grow brighter, larger, closer. Something inside me knows this should frighten me. A distant part of my mind understands what it means. The endless only approach when death approaches. Everyone knows that. I remember Grandma pointing beside the light switch. Just there. 4 months later, she was gone. I should be terrified. Instead, I feel peaceful. The red stars continue expanding. They no longer look like points of light. They look like burning gemstones racing through space. Thousands of them. Millions falling toward me. My personal universe collapsing. I hear myself struggling to breathe. The sound seems to come from somewhere far away. There is a man inside my body who is frightened. I can sense him. He wants to stand. He wants to reach the car. He wants to call someone. He wants to survive. Poor man. His fear is buried beneath layers of warmth and fog. I barely hear him anymore. Above me, the heavens burn crimson. The red lights rush closer. The entire desert is washed in a color nobody else can see. Somewhere beyond the darkness, that other campfire still burns. Those people are probably talking, laughing, living. They cannot see what is happening above me. This sky belongs to me. It always has. I think about my childhood bedroom. All those pages taped to the ceiling. Red crayon dots. Plastic stars stuck there with putty. I remember lying in bed and staring upward, believing I had been given something beautiful, something special. Maybe I was right. Maybe they were never meant to frighten me. Maybe death isn't a creature chasing you. Maybe sometimes it is something you spend your entire life watching from a distance. Something that becomes familiar. Something you grow to love. And when it finally begins moving toward you, perhaps it feels less like an ending than a reunion. The sky continues to fall. My stars are returning, every one of them, closer than they have ever been. Beautiful beyond anything I imagined. I stretch my arms out across the cool sand. My breathing becomes quieter. The last part of me that still understands fear is screaming somewhere deep inside. I let him scream. He doesn't understand. He thinks the stars are coming to take something away. But I know better. They're coming back to me. My grandma's smiling balloon waited beside her light switch. Mine waited beyond the sky. Everyone has an endless. Everyone spends their whole life pretending not to watch it. I watched mine every day. I loved mine. And now, at last, it has filled the heavens. The red stars rush toward the earth like a storm of fire. I smile up at them. My sky is falling. My sky is coming home. Coming back to me. Only me. And I welcome it with open arms. Story 2. I sat on the porch of my family home and looked out over the black chasm that began only a few dozen yards away. At night, it looked endless. A deep, inky drop beneath the village, covered by a layer of dark mist that hid nearly everything moving below. If you stared long enough, though, you could sometimes catch pieces of life inside it. A pale wing passing between trees, the back of some large animal moving through the brush, a flash of eyes near the river. Spirits and beasts traveled through the thickets and between the sharp rocks, flowing across the land like rivers of life and death. To me, it was beautiful. Wild, alive, the elders called it many things, but most people in our village simply called it the night sea. It was not truly a sea. Not in the way people imagine open water. It was a world beneath us. A great valley filled with rivers, forests, cliffs, strange plants, animals, and things nobody could properly name. During the day, it was bright and colorful. At night, it became something else. Something powerful. Something hungry. The night sea could swallow a child like me without effort. Its currents could drag a person under. Its thorny bushes could tear skin from bone. Its beasts could crush you between their jaws before you had time to scream. The elders often described it like an ocean during a storm. Waves, riptides, hidden depths. Except its waves were made of trees and stone, and its teeth belonged to living things. Still, everything we had came from it. Our food, our clothes, our tools, our medicine, even our water. The porch beneath me had been made from mud taken near the riverbanks and bundles of thatch cut from the long, twisted black trees below. Our village existed only because the night sea allowed it. The island where we lived rose high above the valley floor, like a flat-topped rock surrounded by the wilderness. It was our refuge, a safe place. At least that was what we were told. The people in our community treated the night sea almost like a mother. A cruel mother, perhaps, but a mother all the same. She gave everything. and eventually she took everything back. When someone died, we did not bury them in the village. Before sunrise, their body was carried down into the valley and placed on the ground. No grave, no stone, no fire, just the body left in the open. By the next day, something would have taken it. Animals, birds, the river. Sometimes nothing remained at all. People said the dead were being returned to her. Taken apart, used again. Remade as a child, I thought that was beautiful. Every night, when everyone else slept or drank or sang, I would sneak onto the porch and listen. The night sea had a song. That is the best way I can describe it. A chorus, wings fluttering, water gurgling, branches rubbing together, animals crying, things calling from far away. Sometimes the sounds were so strange that I could not tell whether they belonged to animals or people. It was a tragic song, a beautiful one. I imagined the night sea hiding her orchestra beneath darkness, because no human mind could survive seeing everything that created those sounds. There were stories about men who went too deep after sunset. Hunters, drunks, fools, some never returned. Others returned changed. Mad, bleeding, speaking nonsense. A few were found in pieces. Others were said to have been transformed into something that no longer deserved to be called human. During the day, though, the valley seemed harmless. That was when I went down with my parents. My mother hunted birds. They flew in great flocks over the lower rivers, their feathers bright blue and white. When the sunlight caught them, they looked like pieces of the sky had broken loose and learned to fly. Mother was an excellent shot. She used a long spear with a narrow head. She could strike a bird from distances that seemed impossible to me. She saved the feathers. The best ones were woven into capes worn by the men of our village during ceremonies and celebrations. The bones were kept too. Nothing was wasted. Mother crushed them and left the powder in the sun until it turned almost white. She mixed it into medicines with herbs, dried roots, and other things she found in the valley. Father worked among the rocks. He climbed the tall outcroppings between our island and the next. The stone there was striped red and black. He scraped lichen from the sides and collected eggs from nests built near the highest points. Watching him climb used to make my stomach twist. He moved so easily. Hands, feet, one grip to the next. Then, when he was finished, he would jump. Not all the way down. He would drop from ledge to ledge, turning and swinging until he reached the lower rocks. As a child, I thought he moved like an eagle. I stayed in the canoe. I was not trusted enough to wander far. One end of a rope was tied around my wrist. The other end was tied to the canoe. And the canoe itself was tied to wherever my parents were working. I hated it. I told them I was not a baby. They laughed. Still, I was allowed into the shallow water, only a few feet from the boat. I collected clams, empty shells, smooth stones. Sometimes I watched tiny guppies swim around my legs. They were so small and bright that they looked like bits of moving glass. Those days made me happy. When the sun passed the middle of the sky and began its slow fall, everyone started preparing to leave. Families loaded their canoes. Parents shouted for children. Bundles were tied down. The journey home was much harder than the way down. Getting into the valley was easy. A stone channel had been carved into the side of the island generations ago. Our canoes slid down it quickly, like riding a long rock slide. At the bottom, they crashed into the river. Going back meant fighting the current. Adults paddled hard. Children complained. When the river became too steep, we pulled the boats out and carried everything up the old stairs carved into the island wall. That climb was terrible. Hot stones, tired legs, children crying, adults shouting, sandals slapping against rock. The steps had been worn smooth by thousands of feet over countless generations. I always begged to stay longer. So did most of the children. The colors were too beautiful. The painted cliffs, the birds, the water, the strange fruit, the shells. We did not understand why adults became so nervous as sunset approached. They would pat our heads, tell us we would return tomorrow, then warn us about the gaggers. Every child knew about them. The gaggers were supposed to be people who had wandered the night sea after dark and never truly returned. Blue skin, red lips, long black hair. Hair across their backs, too. Men turned into beasts, driven mad by the darkness, lost forever. I thought it was a joke, a story adults used to scare children. I had listened to the night sea every night from my porch. I had never been frightened, not truly. Gaggers, I would laugh whenever someone mentioned them. Maybe wild men existed, maybe old hermits, maybe sick people. But monsters? No. Everything in the valley was an animal, and animals could be understood. I was clever. Everyone told me so. I made jewelry from the things I collected near the river. Shells, tiny bones, polished stones, feathers. Even as a little child, I could make necklaces good enough that the old women nearby asked for them. They would squeeze my cheeks. I hated that. They treated me like a baby. But they also called me bright, resourceful, clever. I liked hearing that. It made me feel different from the other children. Better, maybe I stopped making jewelry around 10 cycles old. That was when Mother left Father. I never fully understood why. Adults never explained these things properly to children. There were arguments, quiet ones at first, then louder ones. One morning, Mother packed her things. I tried to go with her. Father refused. The elders became involved. They decided I should stay. A boy needs his father. That was what they said. Maybe they believed it. I think Father needed me more than I needed him. After Mother left, he changed. Or maybe I simply began noticing what he had always been. He drank. A lot. Adults in the village drank regularly. That was normal. During festivals, everyone drank and sang and danced. People laughed. Neighbors sat together. It was loud, but it was happy. Father was different. He drank alone. He stopped going to celebrations. He stopped climbing the high rocks. Instead, he spent most of his days collecting barrel cactuses from the valleys. He cut them open, stored them in the house, drank the white liquid inside. He called it milk. I hated the smell. Our home slowly filled with empty cactus skins and cups. Father became slower, angrier, sad. Sometimes he would sit for hours without speaking. Other times he shouted at me for almost nothing. I missed the man who had climbed rocks like an eagle. By the time I was 12 cycles old, I had decided I would leave him too. I did not have a real plan. Children rarely do. I only knew I wanted away. The day it happened started normally. We rowed the canoe down the stone channel before sunrise. The boat jumped and rattled over the rock, then splashed into the river below. The sun was just rising behind the neighboring island. We spent the morning gathering. Father found his cactus patches. I searched the shallows. Around midday, families began moving toward the river route home. One canoe after another. People waved. Children shouted. Parents loaded baskets. Father and I stayed. He had found more cactuses. Too many. He stumbled between them, already drinking. At one point, he tripped. He fell directly onto a barrel cactus. He screamed. I looked over. The cactus was only a few feet tall. Its spines were sharp, but not long enough to explain the way Father reacted. He rolled onto the ground, cursed, grabbed his leg, then his side. His words became slurred. I could not understand most of them. He looked pathetic. That thought came to me clearly. Pathetic, he should have been tied to the canoe. Not me. I sat near the river watching him struggle. In my hand was a shell I had found earlier. Rainbow colors crossed its surface. Green, blue, pink, purple. It would have made a beautiful necklace. I thought about the jewelry I used to make. Why had I stopped? Damn it. Father shouted. Help me. I looked at him, and I remembered why. I untied the rope around my wrist. For years, that rope had connected me to the canoe. A child's leash. I let it fall. Then I jumped onto the shore. Father reached toward me. His hand shook. I looked toward the island. Far away, hundreds of tiny figures were already climbing the carved stairs. From that distance, they looked like black insects moving up painted stone. I looked at the sun. Too late. Far too late. Even if I left immediately, rowing alone, I would never reach the village before dark. The current was growing stronger. It always did before night. I looked back at Father. He held one hand toward me. Helpless, I was not helpless. I was clever. That was what everyone said. I turned away, walked to the canoe, untied it from the post, then pushed it into the river. The current caught it immediately. The canoe moved away, slow at first, then faster. Father realized what I was doing. No, his voice sounded small. I watched the canoe disappear downstream. Behind me, Father called again. Please, I did not turn around. The gaggers. His voice cracked. Remember? I smiled. A joke. That was all they were. I entered the thicket. Within a few hours, darkness fell. The night sea rose around me. The sounds I had loved from the porch became much louder when I stood among them. The song was no longer distant, no longer beautiful. It surrounded me. Branches cracked. Things moved through bushes. Water splashed nearby. Something screamed far away. Then closer. I became part of the choir. I had thought I was clever. Maybe I was. It did not matter. Something found me. A great animal. Perhaps a rock cat. I never saw enough to know. I remember a shape. Muscle. Teeth. A yowl so loud that it seemed to shake my bones. Then pain. It hit me. Tore me open. I screamed. It bit. Pulled, my body stopped belonging to me. One moment I had arms, then I did not. One moment I felt legs kicking. Then they were somewhere else. The creature unmade me piece by piece. Blood soaked into the ground. My soul seemed to leak down with it, into dust. Mud, roots, then nothing. I do not know how long I was gone. When I awoke, I was in the river. The current moved gently around me. The sun was rising. I sat up, looked at myself. Whole, no cuts, no bite marks, no torn limbs. Nothing. I touched my chest, my face, my arms. Perfect. For a long time, I sat there wondering whether the attack had been a dream. Then I remembered the pain. Too clearly. Soon I heard voices. People from the village. Morning gatherers. Families returning to the valley. Their song carried across the water. Laughter. Calls. The slap of paddles. I knew one thing immediately. I did not want them. I did not want Father. I did not want the elders. I did not want anyone asking what I had done. So I went back into the woods. That day, nothing attacked me. I wandered, picked berries, listened to birds, sat in patches of sunlight. Night came. I hid beneath a tree. I expected the beasts. Nothing. A wild dog passed nearby. Its face was covered in blood. It walked directly past me, did not look. A rabbit moved through brush beyond me. The dog chased that instead. I never saw a gagger. Not then. Days passed. Then cycles. I stopped being hungry. At first, I still collected berries because I remembered eating. Eventually, I realized I did not need them. I stopped drinking too. I simply walked. I made no clothes. At first, winter cold turned my skin blue. My fingers split. My lips cracked. Blood appeared. But I felt nothing. Not even numbness. Numbness is still a feeling. This was absence. My skin stayed blue. My lips darkened red. My hair grew. Long, black, tangled thorns caught in it. Mud dried inside it. Sometimes I spent entire days walking in rivers. Green growth collected along my body. Algae, slime, I stopped caring. Years passed, maybe more. I lost count. I came to hate the night sea. The song I once loved became torture. Every night it sang, birds, water, cries, life. I would scream back, holler until my throat should have broken. Nothing changed, nothing cared. I was dead to everything except myself. That was when I understood. I had become the thing adults warned us about. Blue skin, red lips, long black hair, a man wandering the night sea forever, a gagger. There had been no joke. I was the joke. I began to understand something else too. The animals were not evil. Rock cats killed because they were hungry. Coyotes tore flesh because they needed food. Wild dogs killed rabbits. Birds ate fish. Then, eventually, those animals died too. Their bodies were taken apart. Returned, remade, they had peace. I had none. I ate nothing, drank nothing, needed nothing, could kill nothing, could barely touch anything. I wandered. That was my punishment. Sometimes I attacked the rocks. I scratched at them for hours. My fingers left no real marks, only red streaks. I screamed at birds. They ignored me. I kicked fish in the shallows. My feet passed through water strangely, and the fish continued swimming. Dogs walked past me. Nothing feared me. Nothing acknowledged me. I had all the rage in the world and no way to use it. That left only thoughts. Thoughts are terrible company when you have forever. I thought about father, mother, the canoe, his hand reaching toward me. Please, the gaggers. Remember, I had done this to myself, but I also blamed him. He had become a drunk. He had ruined our home. He had driven mother away. He had turned me into someone who could leave him lying helpless in the valley. I hated him for that. Then I discovered something worse. He survived. Some late traveler must have found him. Maybe another family had been slow leaving. Maybe a hunter crossed his path. Someone carried him back. Years later, I saw him again. Still alive, still drinking, still alone. He walked through a cactus patch with a basket. Older, slower, his back bent, his beard longer, but alive. I watched him from the trees. I wanted to tear his throat out. I rushed him. My hands went through his neck without effect. I clawed at his eyes. Nothing in my mind. I ripped his stomach open, pulled his guts out like rope, wrapped them around his body. In reality, father simply stumbled onward. He did not even know I was there. That hurt more than anything. The sun had already moved far past its peak when he began walking toward his canoe. His basket was full of cactus. Booze. Always booze. I followed. He reached the river, stood at the edge, swayed. For some reason, he stared into the water. I stepped down into it. The river covered my chest, then my neck. I stayed below the surface. Father leaned forward. I spoke. Father, the word came out distorted through the water, a wet gurgle. Father stiffened. He looked around, then leaned closer. Father, his face changed. He dropped to his hands and knees. His eyes searched the water. I rose slightly. Only my eyes and forehead broke the surface. Then my face. Father stared. I reached up. My hand touched his cheek. For the first time in years, I felt something. His skin, warm, rough, his body froze beneath my fingers. His eyes widened. His voice shook. Is it? I said it again. Father, he began to cry. Real tears. They fell from his face, dropped into the river, landed on mine. I felt them. I tasted salt. His skin shivered beneath my hand. I could feel that too. After so many years of nothing, the smallest sensations felt enormous. Warm skin. Cold tears. A trembling cheek. Please, his voice broke. Let's go home. Maybe he said it. Maybe I did. I still do not know. It does not matter. I stood. Water poured from me. Father stared at my blue skin, my red lips, my long black hair. He knew what I was. He had to. Still, he opened his arms. I embraced him. For the first time since Mother left. For the first time since I had abandoned him. Father wrapped his arms around me. Carefully, at first. Then, tightly. He sobbed into my shoulder. I held him. Then I leaned backward. Father did not fight. He followed me into the water. We fell together. The river closed above us. Down we went. The light became weaker. The current pressed against us. Father held me tightly. Maybe he believed this was forgiveness. Maybe he thought I had come back for him. Maybe he thought his suffering was finally ending. We sank deeper. My back touched the muddy bottom. Father's face pressed against mine. Bubbles escaped his mouth. At first, he struggled to hold his breath. Then, water entered him. His body shook. He hugged me harder. I listened to the bubbles. They almost sounded joyful, like laughter, like relief. Poor Father. He thought we were together again. He thought death would free him. He did not understand. Far above us, sunlight slipped away. The bright surface became a distant line. Then the night sea began to fall. Darkness entered the river. The current pulled at us. I pressed my cheek against his. Then I bit into his face. Father jerked. I bit again. Skin tore. Blood filled the water. His hands pushed weakly against me. For the first time, he understood. I did not let go. I tore him apart, slowly, piece by piece, the way the rock cat had once torn me apart, the way the night sea unmade everything. His blood spread through the river. His body became fragments, then smaller fragments, then a red mist. The current took him, carried him away like dirt, like dead leaves, like common waste. When nothing recognizable remained, I stood. I walked out of the river. Water streamed from my blue skin. My black hair dragged behind me. The night sea sang around me. I did not wait for sunrise. I did not wait to see Father remade. I did not wait to see him open his eyes in the river and discover that death had not saved him. He would learn that for himself, just as I had. Story 3. I found another post connected to the ECA. If you have seen the other post I shared before, then you probably already know how difficult it is to find anything about this organization. Most posts that mention the ECA seem to disappear very quickly. Accounts get deleted, threads vanish, and sometimes even screenshots are taken down from other sites not long after people start sharing them. That is why this one caught my attention. Somehow, the post had survived. Not only that, but almost all of the original details were still there. The person who wrote it claimed to have been a former employee of the ECA, or more specifically, the ECC, which they called the Environmental Containment Crew. According to the post, there was also a smaller division operating under the ECC known as ECC-FA, or Field Agents. I had seen those letters mentioned before, but never with an explanation attached to them. The comment was buried beneath a larger discussion where people were sharing stories about strange, dangerous, or unconventional jobs they had worked in the past. Most of the replies were exactly what you would expect. Oil rig workers, commercial divers, private security contractors, people who cleaned up crime scenes, a man who claimed to have transported hazardous medical waste. Then, between all of those stories, was this one. The users said they had once worked for an environmental contractor based in Washington. At least, that was what the company was officially called. According to them, the job paid extremely well and required constant travel. Their assignments had taken them throughout the United States, Canada, Mexico, and several other places they did not name. The writer claimed they were contracted as part of a containment crew and were officially classified as field personnel. Most of their assignments were apparently unusual, but the one they described took place in a remote section of Northern California. This is what they wrote. I used to work for an environmental contractor out of Washington. That's the simplest way I can describe it. The company had several names depending on who you were talking to and what kind of paperwork you were filling out. Most of the time, we were told to refer to ourselves as an environmental containment crew. If someone asked questions, we were cleaning chemical spills, dealing with contaminated land, assisting after natural disasters, or helping local agencies during emergencies. Sometimes that was even true. I was part of the field side of the operation. The money was good. Very good. Good enough that you learned pretty quickly not to ask too many questions. The work took me everywhere. I worked in the United States, Canada, and Mexico. There were other assignments, too, but I'm not going to list every location because I don't know how much of that information can still be traced back to me. Most of the jobs were strange in one way or another. Sometimes we'd arrive somewhere before local authorities did. Other times, we'd show up after the police or military had already blocked off an area and be told to remove something before the public could see it. You learned to stop asking what things were. The rule was simple. If it wasn't part of your assignment, you didn't need to know. The job I still think about happened in Northern California. We were told there had been an earthquake, not a huge one, nothing that would make international news. But supposedly it had damaged several isolated communities and disturbed a large section of forest. Our assignment was search and recovery. We were told there might be survivors. That alone was unusual, because most of us weren't trained rescue workers. We had people with medical experience, sure, and some of our team had military backgrounds, but we weren't firefighters or search and rescue volunteers. We were containment. Still, nobody questioned it. We loaded up and went. The site was remote, really remote. We had to take service roads through miles of forest, and the farther we drove, the worse the roads became. Eventually, even the trucks couldn't continue. From there, everything had to be carried in. Equipment, food, medical supplies, communication gear, body bags, a lot of body bags. I remember noticing that. If we were searching for survivors, we had brought a strange amount of equipment for collecting bodies. At the time, I didn't think too much about it. That's the kind of thing you learn not to think about in that job. There were 300 people assigned to the search area. My team had 150. We had another team of the same size working with us. We called them our sister team. The area we were assigned to cover was enormous, roughly 300 square miles of forest. We weren't expected to search every inch in one day, obviously. The first plan was to circle the outer boundary of the assigned zone. Our sister team would follow behind us, marking routes and establishing check stations, so we'd have places to return to as we pushed deeper into the forest. Those check stations had radios, water, first aid equipment, emergency food, and location markers. The entire operation was organized almost like a military sweep. At the time, I still believed we were looking for earthquake survivors. But there were things that didn't fit. For one thing, there wasn't much visible earthquake damage. We saw a few fallen trees, some loose rock, a couple of small landslides. Nothing that looked severe enough to justify 300 people being sent into the woods. There were no destroyed houses, no ruined roads, no collapsed structures, no smoke, no injured hikers. Nothing. A few people commented on it. Nobody in charge answered. We completed one full trip around the designated area. That took a while. After that, the plan changed. We were told to establish line patrols. Basically, everyone would form a long line with a set distance between each person and move through the forest in sections. We'd sweep one strip, regroup, then move over and sweep the next one. It was slow, exhausting work. The ground was rough. Dense brush, steep slopes, fallen branches. Some areas were wet enough that your boots sank several inches into the soil. The first line produced nothing. No survivors, no bodies, no signs that anyone had even been living in the area. Then we started the second line. We were maybe halfway through when everything changed. One of the people farther down the line called out over the radio. At first, I thought someone had found an injured person. Then I heard the tone in his voice. He wasn't excited. He sounded confused. A few seconds later, another call came through. Then another. People began breaking formation. Our supervisors started shouting for everyone to maintain position, but by then, several of us had already moved toward the first discovery. There was a body at the base of a tree. A person. Dead, at least. That's what we thought at first. The body was sitting strangely. Its back was against the trunk, and its head had fallen forward. There was no obvious sign that the earthquake had killed them. No fallen tree. No rock slide. No debris. Just a dead person in the middle of the forest. Then someone about 30 or 40 yards away shouted that they had another one. A third person found another. We started looking around. That's when we realized there was a pattern. The bodies weren't scattered randomly. They were arranged. Every fourth tree. That's the detail I remember most clearly. Someone started counting. 1 tree, 2, 3, body, then another 3 trees. Body, again and again and again. The line continued so far into the forest that we couldn't see the end of it. At first, nobody spoke. Then, people started calling for command. More supervisors arrived. We were ordered not to touch anything until the area had been photographed. I don't know who had placed those bodies there. I don't know how long they had been there. But it wasn't random. There were roughly 200 trees in the sequence. Every fourth one had a body. By the time we reached the far end, we had found around 50 positions where someone had apparently been placed. Not all of them still had complete remains, though. Some were disturbed. Some were partially buried under leaves. Some may have been moved by animals. By the end of the day, we recovered 40 bodies. That's the number I remember. 40, at first, we assumed all 40 were human. They weren't. Half of them were. The human bodies were horrible. There wasn't one clear cause of death. That made the scene even stranger. If they'd all been shot, you could imagine an execution. If they'd all been crushed, maybe you could try to connect it to the supposed earthquake. But every body seemed to have suffered something different. One had a broken jaw so severe that the lower part of the face hung at an angle. Another had both arms broken. Someone else was missing a leg. A few had limbs that had been skinned, not cut off. The skin had been removed while most of the muscle and bone remained. Several bodies had organs removed. One person had a large open cavity in the abdomen. Another had the chest opened. The injuries didn't look accidental, at least not to me. They looked deliberate. Some of the more experienced people on the crew stopped talking altogether once we started moving them. Nobody made jokes. Nobody complained about the smell. We just worked. Then there were the other bodies. Calling them bodies still feels wrong. They looked human. At first glance, completely human. Same size, same shape, same skin, same hair. Hands, feet, everything. But once you got close enough, you noticed the faces. There weren't any. Not damaged faces, not burned, not removed. There were simply no facial features. Smooth skin where the eyes should have been. No eyelids, no eyebrows, no visible eyes underneath, no nose in the normal sense, no real mouth. The surface of the face was almost completely smooth. It wasn't like someone had cut the features away. There were no wounds, no scars, no blood. It looked as though the face had simply never formed. The hands were strange, too. Each finger was shaped normally. There were fingernails, knuckles, skin folds. But no fingerprints. None. One of the crew members actually took gloves off and compared his fingertips to one of them because people thought maybe the ridges were simply faint. They weren't there. The skin was completely smooth. Every one of those non-human bodies looked almost exactly the same. Not identical in the way twins look identical, more like copies made from the same basic design. Same height, same build, same general skin tone, same hair, same proportions. All of them were completely intact. No broken limbs, no missing parts, no injuries, at least none that we could see. That changed when one of our guys tripped. The ground around the trees was uneven and covered in roots. One of the field agents stepped backward, caught his boot, and fell. Instinctively, he put his hand out to stop himself. His hand landed on the chest of one of those things. It broke. I don't mean the ribs broke. The whole chest collapsed under his hand. The skin split, and his arm went inside almost to the wrist. He screamed and pulled away. Everyone around him froze. There was no blood, no exposed muscle, no bones, no organs. Instead, a clear substance spilled out. It was thick, almost like gel. Imagine transparent jelly mixed with glue. That's the closest comparison I can give. It clung to his glove and stretched in strings when he pulled his hand back. One person started vomiting. Another guy cursed and backed away. Our supervisor immediately ordered everyone to stop touching the remains. The broken chest stayed open. You could see inside. There was nothing in there. No lungs, no heart, no ribs, no stomach, no bones. The entire body was filled with that clear material. It was packed solid. Someone cut open part of one of the other bodies later. I wasn't supposed to see it, but I did. Same thing. Clear gel from the neck all the way down. As far as I know, there was no skeleton. No organs. Nothing. Yet the outside felt human. I touched one of the arms before we were ordered to stop. The skin had warmth from the sun. It had pores, small hairs, even veins beneath the surface. If you didn't know what was inside, you would have believed you were touching a dead person. The hair was real, too. At least it felt real. One of the medical people pulled a strand and examined the root. He didn't say anything afterward. We asked what they were. Nobody answered. Command changed the rules almost immediately. The area was locked down. Radios were restricted. Nobody was allowed to leave the search zone alone. All photographs and recordings had to be turned over. Personal phones weren't technically supposed to be with us anyway, but a few people had them. Those were collected too. The bodies were separated. The human remains went into one group. The others went into sealed containment bags. Those bags were then placed inside heavier transport containers. Nobody told us where they were going. By evening, we had recovered 40 bodies total. Roughly half human. Roughly half whatever those other things were. I remember asking one of the team leads what happened to the earthquake. He stared at me for a second. Then he said, "Don't worry about the earthquake." That was it. I never heard anyone mention survivors again. There weren't any survivors. There wasn't even evidence of a normal disaster. No campsite, no vehicles, no buildings, no trail leading to where the bodies were found, nothing to explain how 40 bodies had been transported into the middle of that forest, and definitely nothing explaining why they had been placed every fourth tree for such a long distance. We spent the rest of the day removing everything, not just the bodies, everything. Blood-stained soil was dug up. Branches were cut down if they had anything on them. Leaves were collected. Clothing fragments, hair, anything that looked like it might have belonged to one of the dead. Even the clear substance that spilled onto the ground had to be removed. People in protective suits scraped contaminated soil into sealed containers. By the time we finished, the entire location looked disturbed, but there was almost nothing left showing what had actually happened there. Then, we were told to continue searching. For 3 weeks. 3 full weeks. Every day, we ran sweeps through the area. Different patterns, different lines, different sections. Sometimes dogs were brought in. Sometimes equipment I didn't recognize was used. There were devices on tripods that looked like surveying tools, but I don't think they were measuring land. A different group arrived during the second week. They didn't introduce themselves. They wore no company logos. They asked us questions about what we'd seen. Very specific questions. Did any of the bodies move? Did anyone hear voices before finding them? Did the non-human bodies have teeth? Did anyone see insects feeding on them? Did the gel react to heat? Did anyone touch the skin with bare hands? Did anyone dream about the sight afterward? That last question bothered me. I asked why they wanted to know. The man questioning me didn't answer. He just repeated the question. I told him no, that was a lie. I had dreamed about the forest twice by then. In the dream, the bodies weren't sitting against the trees anymore. They were standing. All of the faceless ones were facing me. The human bodies were facing away. I never told anyone that. After 3 weeks, the operation ended. We packed up and left. There was no press, no local news, no missing person story connected to 40 bodies, no reports about strange remains in Northern California. Nothing. I searched for earthquake reports from the area afterward. I found small seismic events, but nothing matching what we had supposedly been sent there for. Nothing serious enough to explain an operation of that size. That's when I understood that the earthquake story had probably never been real. It had been a cover, a reason to move hundreds of people and equipment into the forest without attracting too much attention. If locals saw trucks, helicopters, or crews going in, they could be told we were responding to an earthquake. Simple, believable, temporary. A's for the bodies, I still don't know. The easiest explanation is that they were fake. Some kind of training equipment. Advanced mannequins. Experimental synthetic bodies. Anything like that would make more sense than what I actually saw. So that's what I tell myself. They were fake. They had to be. The human bodies were real. I know that. I helped carry several of them. But the others? Maybe they were artificial. Maybe some company made them. Maybe the clear gel was some kind of synthetic filling. Maybe the skin was manufactured. Maybe the hair was implanted. Maybe we found an illegal testing site. That's the best explanation I've ever been able to come up with. But it doesn't explain why they were placed beside dead people. It doesn't explain why each one was positioned at regular intervals. It doesn't explain why the supposedly fake bodies had skin that looked and felt exactly like ours. And it doesn't explain why we spent 3 weeks searching the forest after they were removed. If the goal was only to clean up a crime scene, we would have left. We didn't. We kept searching. For something. I don't know what. Maybe more bodies. Maybe whoever put them there. Maybe something else. I stopped working for the company not long after. There were other jobs. Other things I saw. Some of them were worse in different ways. But that forest is the one I remember most clearly. Every fourth tree. Human, then not human. Then human. Then not. Over and over. Like someone was comparing them. That's the thought I try not to have. I don't know who arranged the bodies or why. I don't know what those faceless things were. I don't know whether the real people died before they arrived in the forest or afterward. I don't even know whether the entire operation was really run by the company I thought I worked for. All I know is what I saw. And I know it was never on the news. We made sure there was nothing left for anyone else to find. So when I think back on it now, I tell myself the same thing I've been telling myself for years. The bodies were fake. At least half of them were. Somehow, they had to be. End of post. That was where the comment ended. There was no follow-up from the original author. Naturally, people underneath the post had questions. A lot of them. Some wanted to know the exact location in Northern California. The author never answered. Another person asked what ECA stood for. No answer. Someone asked whether the clear substance had ever been tested. Another asked whether the faceless bodies had male or female anatomy. One commenter wanted to know if the human bodies had been identified. None of those questions received a response. One person replied that the story sounded like an ARG, or fictional horror post. Someone else said the details about containment procedures sounded too specific to have been invented. There was also a short argument about whether 300 people could really search an area that large. Then, the thread went quiet. When I found it, the original account had already been deleted. I tried searching the username through archived pages and cached results. Nothing useful came up. I searched exact lines from the post. A few fragments appeared in reposts, but most led back to deleted pages or dead links. I looked for anything about a mass casualty incident in Northern California involving approximately 40 bodies. Nothing. I searched earthquake databases for events that might match the time period people believed the comment was posted. There were earthquakes, obviously. California has them constantly. But nothing I found clearly matched the description. No major search operation. No reports of hundreds of environmental workers moving into a remote forest. No unexplained recovery of multiple bodies. Nothing. The strangest part is that the post survived as long as it did. If the other ECA material I've collected is real, then someone appears to be very good at removing references to it. This one somehow remained visible long enough to be copied. Maybe that was an accident. Maybe it was fake and nobody cared. Or maybe whoever normally removes these things simply missed it. I still don't know. The easiest answer is that someone made the whole story up. That is always possible. People lie online. People write fictional stories and present them as real. And stories about secret organizations are easy to build because the lack of evidence becomes part of the mystery. But there are details in this post that bother me. Not because they prove anything. They don't. It's the way the writer describes the work. The lack of drama. The focus on procedures. Check stations. Line patrols. Recovery numbers. Containment bags. Sweeps lasting weeks. If somebody invented it, they understood how to make the unbelievable sound routine. Maybe that's exactly why it works as a story. Or maybe the writer really did spend years treating impossible things like another day at work. I keep coming back to one detail. Every fourth tree. If the bodies were simply dumped there, why arrange them? If it was a crime, why create a pattern so obvious? And why alternate real human remains with the faceless ones? The original writer never actually said they were intentionally alternated. Maybe they weren't. But from the way the post is written, they were found mixed throughout the same line. Humans with mutilated bodies. Then intact copies that only looked human on the outside. That almost sounds like a failed attempt at something. A comparison. A test. Copies beside originals. I know that's speculation. I'm not presenting it as fact. At the moment, the post is all I have. The account is gone. The thread is mostly dead. There are no photos, no confirmed names, no exact date, no location specific enough to search. Just a deleted person claiming they once worked for an environmental containment team and found 40 bodies in a forest that supposedly suffered an earthquake. Half human. Half something else. I've saved every copy of the post I could find. If more disappears, At least this version should remain. I'm still searching for other references to the ECA, the Environmental Containment Crew, and anything mentioning ECC-FAW field agents. So far, I haven't found another direct account of this particular incident. But if the post was real, there were supposedly around 300 people involved in that operation. 300. Even if most of them kept quiet, that is a lot of witnesses. Someone else has to remember that forest. Someone else has to remember those bodies. And if even one of them ever decides to talk, I want to find what they leave behind before it disappears too. Story 4. I live very far away from my village now. It has been many years since I left. These days, I live in a large city, hundreds of kilometers from the place where I grew up. The city is crowded and noisy, with traffic at almost every hour, apartment buildings packed together, and lights that make the streets bright even after midnight. It is completely different from my village. My village is near the edge of my state in India, not very far from the state border. Even when I was young, it felt separated from the rest of the world. There were only a few roads leading in and out, and most of the land around us was covered with farms, empty fields, dirt paths, and small groups of trees. At night, the village became incredibly quiet. There were no bright streetlights on every road. No shops stayed open all night. Once people finished dinner and went inside their homes, darkness seemed to swallow everything outside. As a child, I never thought much about it. That was simply home. My family owned an old house in the village and some agricultural land a short distance outside it. The house is still standing today, and the land still belongs to our family, although nobody takes care of it the way my father once did. My father died several years ago. Even writing that sentence still feels strange. For most of my childhood, he seemed like the strongest person I knew. He was not a man who talked much about his feelings, and I almost never saw him frightened. He worked hard, woke early, and spent long days managing our fields. He knew every path around the village, every farmer who owned the neighboring land, every old tree, every irrigation channel, and almost every strange story people told about the countryside. My father was also not someone who believed in foolish things. At least, that was what I always thought. If somebody told a story about a ghost or some spirit near the village, my father would usually laugh and tell them they had been drinking too much or frightening themselves in the dark. Maybe that is why one particular night from my childhood has stayed with me for so long. I was 11 years old when it happened. I had almost forgotten about it after moving away. Almost for many years, I convinced myself that my memory had exaggerated what happened. Children misunderstand things. Darkness can make ordinary sounds seem frightening. Animals can make noises that sound strangely human. Those explanations were enough for a long time. But recently, something brought the memory back. And now, I cannot stop thinking about it. When I was young, my father sometimes took me to our agricultural land with him. I enjoyed going. To me, the fields felt like another world compared with the village. During the day, everything seemed wide and peaceful. Depending on the season, crops stretched across the land in neat rows, moving gently whenever the wind passed over them. Our land was located a little outside the village. It was not terribly far, but at night, the distance felt much greater. From certain parts of the field, you could not clearly see the village houses. You might see a few weak lights in the distance, but you could not hear people talking. There was a narrow dirt path connecting our land to the main village road. Near one side of the field stood a small tube well room made of brick and cement. It contained the equipment used to pump groundwater into the irrigation channels. The room was nothing special. It had one door, a small window, and a weak electric bulb outside. There was also an old charpai near it, the traditional woven bed that people often kept outside in villages. My father sometimes rested on it while waiting for the field to receive enough water. A few trees stood around the edges of the land, but most of the area was open farmland. During daylight, I never found the place frightening. At night, it was different. One evening, my father said he needed to go out and check the irrigation. I immediately asked if I could come. He refused. "It will be late," he told me. "Stay home." I kept asking. Children can be stubborn when they decide they want something, and I was no different. I told him I would not cause trouble. I promised I would stay near him. I said I was not tired. My mother told me to stop bothering him, but I continued until my father finally became annoyed enough to agree. "All right," he said, "but when I tell you to sit somewhere, you sit there. No wandering around." I agreed immediately. If I had known what would happen later, I would have stayed home. We left after dinner. I remember riding with my father toward the fields as darkness settled around us. By the time we reached our land, night had completely taken over. There was no moon. Thick clouds covered most of the sky, hiding the stars as well. The only real light came from the small bulb outside the tube well room. It cast a weak yellow circle onto the dirt nearby, but beyond that small area, everything disappeared into darkness. I remember standing beside my father and looking toward the fields. The crops seemed much taller at night. During the day, I could see over large sections of them. That night, they looked like dark walls. My father went inside the tube well room and started the water motor. The machine came alive with a deep mechanical roar. Water began moving through the irrigation channels. For a while, the noise made the place feel less lonely. My father checked several channels with a flashlight while I walked behind him. Eventually, he told me to sit on the charpai. "Stay here," he said. "Where are you going?" "To the far side." "Can I come?" "No." He pointed at the charpai. "Sit. I'll be back." I did what he told me. My father carried his flashlight and walked into the field. For the first few seconds, I could see the light moving above the crops. Then it disappeared. I could still hear the water motor behind me. The constant sound was comforting. I sat on the charpai and swung my legs back and forth. I remember looking toward the path leading home. There was nothing there, just darkness. After some time, my father returned to the tube well and turned off the motor. The sudden silence surprised me. 1 second, there was a loud machine running beside me. The next, there was almost nothing. The silence felt enormous. I could hear insects. Somewhere far away, a night bird called. Water continued running slowly through one of the channels. Then my father told me he needed to check something else. "Stay here," he repeated. He walked away again. This time, after he disappeared among the crops, I became uncomfortable. I was not exactly afraid. Not yet. But I suddenly became very aware that I was alone. The yellow bulb above the tube well room seemed weaker than before. Everything outside its circle of light looked completely black. I could not see my father. I could not see the village. I sat quietly and waited. Then I heard something behind me, a soft movement. I turned around quickly. Nothing. The dirt path stretched away from the tube well. I stared at it. For a moment, I thought something had moved near the edge of the light. Maybe a dog, maybe a goat. There were plenty of animals around the village. I waited. Nothing happened. I turned back toward the field. A few seconds later, I heard it again, something scraping lightly against the dirt. I stood. Papa? My voice sounded strange in the empty field. A few seconds passed. Then my father answered from far away. Stay there. I'm coming. His voice came from somewhere across the field. That immediately made me feel better. I sat back down. My father was nearby. There was nothing to worry about. Then I heard footsteps. At first, I smiled. I thought my father was returning. The footsteps were slow. Crunch, pause, crunch, pause. They were coming from the direction of the dirt path behind me. I turned around. There was nobody there. The footsteps continued. I stared into the darkness. Papa? No answer. The sound stopped. I remember my heartbeat becoming a little faster. Maybe it was an animal. Animals did not walk exactly like people, but I was 11 years old. I did not know what every creature sounded like in darkness. I stood near the charpai and listened. Nothing. Then the footsteps started again. This time, they were not on the path. They were inside the crops. To my right, several meters away, step, 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 the plants moved. That is something I remember very clearly. There was no wind. The night was almost perfectly still, but a narrow section of crops moved as if someone was slowly walking through them. I watched the movement come closer. Papa? No answer. The crops stopped moving. I swallowed. Papa? Then I heard my father's voice. It came from inside the field. It said my name. I almost relaxed. Almost. Something about the voice was wrong. I cannot explain it perfectly. It sounded like my father. The same basic tone. The same voice. But the way it said my name was strange. Too slow. Too stretched. As if someone had heard my father speak before and was trying to copy him without understanding exactly how people talked. My name came from the darkness again. Quietly, I stood there listening. At 11 years old, I did not immediately think of anything supernatural. My first thought was simply that my father was playing with me. Papa? The voice answered by saying my name again. I stepped off the area beside the charpai. The crops moved slightly. I started walking toward them. The voice came from deeper inside. My father had told me not to leave the charpai, but I thought he was calling me, so I took another step, then another. I was almost at the edge of the crops when a voice exploded behind me. Don't go there. I jumped so violently that I nearly fell. I turned around. My father was standing beside the tube well room. The real one. He had come from the opposite direction. I remember staring at him. For a moment, my 11-year-old mind could not understand what I was seeing. If my father was standing behind me, who had called me from inside the crops? My father hurried toward me. He looked angry, not normal angry. His face was hard, and his eyes were fixed on the part of the field I had been approaching. He grabbed my arm. His fingers closed tightly around it. What are you doing? He demanded. You called me. His expression changed. What? You called me. I didn't call you. Yes, you did. No, he pulled me away from the field. I heard you, I insisted. You said my name. My father looked toward the crops. The plants were completely still now. Nothing moved. He stared for several seconds. I expected him to tell me it was an animal. I expected him to laugh. Instead, he said nothing. That scared me more than anything else. My father walked quickly toward the tube well room. I followed him. "What was it?" I asked. No answer. "Papa?" He stepped beneath the small yellow bulb. Then he reached up and switched it off. I still remember that moment more clearly than almost anything else from that night. The light disappeared. Darkness fell over us instantly. Not normal darkness. Complete darkness. The clouds covered the sky, and there was no moon. Without the bulb, I could barely see my own hand. I panicked. "Why did you turn it off?" My father immediately grabbed my hand. "Come." "Why?" "Come." He started walking quickly toward the path leading back toward the village. I had to move fast to keep up. I remember being confused. Why would he turn off the only light? At the time, it seemed like the worst possible thing to do. Only years later did I wonder whether he turned it off because the light allowed something else to see us. We moved along the dirt path. My father held my hand very tightly. I kept asking questions. "What was in the field?" "Nothing. Did you hear it?" "Nothing, Papa. Why aren't we taking our time?" "Keep walking." That was all he said. The darkness behind us felt alive. I became certain that someone was following us. I did not hear clear footsteps anymore, but every few seconds I thought I heard movement somewhere behind us. A plant brushing another plant, dry soil shifting, something crossing the path. I kept turning my head slightly. My father noticed. "Look forward." We were perhaps halfway back toward where we had left the motorcycle when curiosity became stronger than fear. I looked back. The tube well room was visible in the distance only as a darker shape against the night. At first, I saw nothing. Then, I noticed something near it. A person. At least, I thought it was a person. A tall, dark shape stood close to where the sharp eye had been. It was completely still. I could not see a face. I could not see clothes. I could not even be certain it was human. But it had the shape of someone standing upright, watching us. I stopped walking. "Papa," my father pulled my hand. "Keep moving. There's someone there." He did not turn around. "Papa, look." His grip tightened painfully. "Don't look back again." Something in his voice made me obey. I turned forward. We reached the motorcycle without speaking anymore. My father started it quickly. I climbed on behind him and wrapped my arms around his waist. We rode back toward the village. Neither of us said anything during the ride. I remember looking at the dark fields passing beside us. Every tree looked like a person. Every shadow seemed to move. I wanted to turn around and see whether someone was following us, but I remembered what my father had said. Don't look back again. When we finally reached the village, I felt some of the fear leave me. There were houses again, dogs barking, a few lights, familiar roads. My mother asked why we had returned so quickly. My father told her there had been some problem with the water. That was all. I wanted to tell her what had happened. Before I could, my father looked at me. He did not shake his head. He did not say anything. But something in his expression told me to stay quiet. That night, I refused to sleep alone. I slept beside my father. Normally, he would have told me I was getting too old for that. That night, he allowed it without argument. I remember waking several times. Once, I thought I heard someone walking outside our house. Another time, I thought I heard my name, very softly, from somewhere beyond the window. I pulled the blanket over my head. I did not answer. In the morning, everything seemed normal again. Sunlight came through the windows. My mother was preparing breakfast. People were moving outside. The terror of the previous night already felt less real. So I asked my father what had happened. He was getting ready to leave. What was that thing last night? He did not look at me. What thing? The thing in the field. There was nothing. I heard your voice. You probably heard an animal. It sounded exactly like you. He picked up something from the table. I continued, and I saw someone near the tube well. My father stopped. For a second, I thought he would finally explain. Instead, he walked toward the door. Before leaving the room, he turned back. His expression was serious. If you ever hear my voice in the fields when you know I'm somewhere else, don't answer it. I stared at him. What? Don't answer. Why? He looked at me for another second. Then he left. That was the only warning he ever gave me. Years passed. My father never mentioned the incident again. I asked once or twice when I was a teenager, but he always changed the subject. Eventually, I stopped asking. I grew older. I left the village for studies and later found work in a distant city. At first, I visited home often. Then, life became busy. Visits became less frequent. After my father died, returning to the village became even harder. The old house did not feel the same without him. His chair was still there. His tools were still stored in familiar places. For months after his death, I would sometimes enter a room and expect to hear his voice. Our agricultural land remained in the family, although relatives and local workers handled most of it. The old tube well was still there, too. I avoided visiting that particular field at night. I told myself it was simply because there was no reason to go. That was not completely true. Even as an adult, I remembered my father's warning. If you ever hear my voice in the fields when you know I'm somewhere else, don't answer it. Eventually, I moved even farther away. Years went by. I married. I built a life that had almost nothing to do with the village. The strange night became a childhood memory that I rarely allowed myself to think about. Then, a few weeks ago, one of my relatives called. We talked about normal family things first. Then he mentioned the land. The old tube well has stopped working, he said. I became quiet. Which one? Even though I already knew. The one on your father's field. I looked out the window of my apartment. Outside, cars moved through the city streets. People walked beneath electric lights. Everything around me was modern, crowded, familiar. My relative continued talking. He said somebody should inspect the pump and decide whether it was worth repairing. Since the land belonged to our family, he asked if I could come back to the village. You haven't visited in a long time anyway, he added. Come for a few days. I'll think about it, I said. We ended the call. Afterward, I sat alone for a long time. I do not know why that conversation affected me so strongly. It was only a broken tube well. Machines break. Pumps stop working. There was nothing strange about it. But hearing those words brought the entire childhood memory back. The sharp eye, the yellow bulb, the crops moving without wind, the voice saying my name, my father shouting from behind me, the dark shape standing beside the tube well. I remembered details I had not thought about for years. Then, I remembered one more thing, something I had somehow pushed out of my mind. When my father grabbed my hand that night, his hand had been shaking. Not a little. It had been trembling badly. My father, the man I had seen handle snakes, angry bulls, dangerous machinery, terrible storms, and drunken men without showing fear, had been shaking. As a child, I had assumed he was angry. Now I understand the difference. He was terrified, and that realization created another question. My father had not looked confused when I told him something inside the field had copied his voice. He had not asked what I meant. He had not searched the crops. He had not called the neighbors. He had simply turned off the light, grabbed me, and left. Almost as if he already knew what was there. Almost as if it had happened before. I have thought many times about calling one of the older men in the village and asking if they know anything. I have not done it. Part of me does not want an answer. The relative who called me has contacted me again about the broken tube well. I still have not told him when I am coming. Maybe I will go. It is only land. It is my family's land, and I am not 11 years old anymore. Still, when I imagine returning, I always picture myself standing beside that old tube well after sunset. I imagine the fields becoming dark. I imagine the village disappearing in the distance. And I imagine hearing a voice somewhere among the crops. A voice I have not heard in years. My father's voice. Calling my name. Sometimes I wonder what I would do. Would I remember his warning? Would I stay silent? Or after all these years, would hearing my dead father's voice make me answer before I could stop myself? I still do not know what was standing near the tube well that night. I do not know what called me from inside the crops. But there is one thing I know now that I did not understand when I was 11. Whatever was in that field did not simply sound like my father by accident. It knew his voice. And my father knew enough about it to be afraid. Story 5. I need to make one thing very clear before I explain any of this. I live alone. I have never been married, and I do not have children. I know that sounds like an odd way to begin, but it matters. It matters more than anything else I am about to tell you. Because if you forget that one fact, the rest of this will sound like nothing more than the rambling of an exhausted man losing his mind. Maybe I am losing my mind. I honestly do not know anymore. A few weeks ago, my job started consuming almost every hour of my life. A major project had fallen behind schedule, and management decided the best solution was to keep throwing more work at the few people who were already drowning in it. I was getting to the office before sunrise and leaving well after dark. Most days, I barely had enough energy to eat something before collapsing into bed. My dog, Marcus, hated it. Marcus had been with me for almost 7 years. He was the closest thing I had to family in that house. Every evening, he used to wait for me with a tennis ball in his mouth, ready for our usual game of fetch in the backyard. Lately, I had been too tired even for that. He would follow me around the house with the ball, tail wagging hopefully, until eventually he would give up and curl onto his bed. I always promised him we would play the next night. Then the next night came, and I was too tired again. That was how things were when it started. I remember the first night perfectly. It was already completely dark when I pulled into my driveway. I sat behind the wheel for a few seconds, staring at my humble 2-story house and trying to gather enough energy to walk inside. The porch light was on. I did not remember leaving it on that morning. I did not think much of it. I got out, locked the car, and dragged myself to the front door. The second I stepped inside, I shut the door behind me and leaned against it. Home, finally, Marcus. I called. "Where are you, boy?" A bark came from somewhere deeper in the house. I smiled. At least somebody was happy to see me. I opened the coat closet and hung up my jacket. Then I heard a voice. Dad? I froze. It came from the living room, a young woman's voice. Soft, familiar in a way that made absolutely no sense. Dad, is that you? My hand remained on the closet door. For several seconds, I did not move. Then, I slowly turned around. A young woman was standing beside my couch. She looked maybe 18 years old. She had shoulder-length dark hair, jeans, and an oversized college sweatshirt. She stood there casually, as though she belonged in my house. More disturbing than anything else was the smile on her face. She smiled like I was exactly who she had been waiting for. Did you have a good day, Dad? I backed against the front door. What are you doing in my house? I whispered. The smile faded. She tilted her head. What? Who are you? She gave a small, nervous laugh. Come on, Dad, I said nothing. It's me. She pointed toward herself. Your daughter. My stomach dropped. I stared at her. She stared back. The confusion on her face looked real. Then, her expression became worried. Hey, she said carefully. What's wrong? Are you okay? She took one step toward me. That was enough. I grabbed the door handle, threw the door open, and ran outside. I slammed it shut behind me and stumbled toward my car. My hands were shaking so badly that I almost dropped my phone while calling 911. The dispatcher answered quickly. 911. What is your emergency? Yes, I said, breathing hard. Someone broke into my house. There's a woman inside. She was waiting for me when I got home. The dispatcher asked for my name, then my address. Then she asked whether the intruder had a weapon. I don't know. Are you currently outside the residence? Yes, stay there. Officers are on the way. I stood beside my car, staring at the house. No one came out. No lights turned on or off. Nothing moved behind the windows. The entire time, one thought kept repeating in my head. She called me Dad. Maybe 10 minutes later, a police cruiser pulled into the driveway. 2 officers got out. One was older, broad-shouldered, and calm. The other looked younger, but more cautious. How are you doing, sir? The older one called. Everything all right? No, I said. Everything is not all right. I came home and found some stranger inside my house. Okay, the younger officer said. Take it easy. Have you ever seen this person before? No. Any idea how she got inside? No. Any missing keys? No, the officers exchanged a glance. And you said she called you Dad? Yes. Do you have children? No, that answer seemed to get their attention. They nodded and walked toward the front door. I followed a few steps behind. The older officer knocked firmly. Ma'am, open the door. Police. Movement came from inside. A shadow appeared behind the narrow front window. Then the door opened. The young woman stood there. She looked frightened. Officers? She asked. What's wrong? Is everything okay? Then she noticed me standing behind them. Her expression changed instantly. Dad? What's going on? The older officer looked at her. Ma'am, this gentleman says you broke into his home. We're going to need you to step outside. Her face twisted with confusion. What? He says he doesn't know you. That's ridiculous. She looked past them at me. Dad, tell them. I've never seen you before in my life, I shouted. Her face fell. It looked like I had slapped her. Dad, the younger officer stepped between us. Ma'am, do you have any identification? Anything that proves you live here or that you're related to him? Yes, she said immediately. Yes, of course. She pulled out her phone. Look at my home screen. She unlocked it and handed it to the officer. He stared. Then his eyebrows tightened. He looked at me. Sir, he held the phone out. I took it. The image on the screen made my legs weak. It was a photograph of me and the girl. We were standing in front of the Statue of Liberty. My arm was wrapped around her shoulder. She was laughing. I was smiling. It looked completely real. I knew the location. I had visited New York the previous year. I remembered that trip clearly. I had gone alone. No daughter. No teenager. No one else. Yet there I was in the picture, smiling beside her as though we had shared that day together. What is this? I whispered. The girl spoke quickly. I can do better. She turned and hurried into the house. The officers watched me carefully. I could feel their suspicion shifting. Half a minute later, she returned holding a driver's license. She handed it to the older officer. He examined it. Then he looked at me. Is this your last name, sir? It was. Same last name, same address. Her license looked legitimate. What the hell is happening? I muttered. The officers shared another glance. This one was different. Less suspicion, more sympathy. Sir, the older one said gently, have you been feeling okay lately? I looked at him. What? Any confusion? Trouble sleeping? Memory issues? No, the younger officer gave me a careful smile. If you need to talk to somebody, there's nothing wrong with that. I could barely hear them. Their voices became distant, muffled, like they were speaking underwater. Then the girl came toward me. He's okay, she told them. He's just been working really long hours lately. He hasn't been sleeping. I'll take care of him. Before I could react, she stepped outside and took my hand. Her skin was cold. Not cool from the weather. Cold, unnaturally cold. She guided me into the house, and suddenly the place did not feel like mine anymore. There were women's shoes beside the door. A handbag hung from a hook I did not remember owning. The hallway was covered in framed photographs. In one, I stood beside the girl at a birthday party. In another, I was teaching her how to ride a bicycle. Another showed us at Christmas. Another showed her with Marcus. Marcus that terrified me almost more than the pictures. He came trotting into the hallway and went straight to her. His tail wagged. He jumped up happily, and she laughed as she scratched behind his ears. He knew her. Or at least, he acted like he did. The officers watched this. Their expressions told me everything. To them, I was the strange one now. They said a few final words before leaving. The girl thanked them. Then she shut the door. I stood in the living room, unable to speak. She turned around and hugged me. I almost screamed. Her body was cold and stiff. It did not feel like hugging a person. It felt like wrapping my arms around a mannequin that had been stored in a freezer. She pulled back and smiled. I'm sorry you're so tired, she said. Why don't you go upstairs and get some sleep? I'll take Marcus out tonight. Her voice was too cheerful, too perfect. I clenched my jaw. Everything inside me wanted to leave. Instead, I nodded. I walked upstairs. The staircase walls were covered with more pictures. Pictures of an entire life that had never happened. Me holding a newborn baby. The same girl as a toddler. Her first day of school. A missing tooth. Halloween costumes. Birthdays, Christmas mornings. Prom. A high school graduation from only a few weeks earlier. By the time I reached the top step, I was crying. Not because I remembered her, because I did not. How could a person forget an entire child? Was I sick? Had something happened to my brain? Was I so exhausted that I had somehow erased my own daughter from memory? I tried to remember her name. Nothing came. Not even the first letter. I entered my bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed. I wanted to think. Instead, exhaustion took over. I fell backward and was asleep within minutes. My alarm went off at 5:30 the next morning. I opened my eyes. For a few seconds, everything was normal. Then I remembered the night before. The girl, the photographs, the police, the cold hug. I sat up immediately. The house was quiet. I slowly opened my bedroom door. No voices, no movement. I stepped into the hallway. The photographs were gone. Every single one. The staircase wall was bare. I hurried downstairs. The women's shoes had vanished. The handbag was gone. The living room looked exactly as it always had. Marcus lifted his head from his dog bed and wagged his tail. I stood there breathing heavily, no sign of a young woman, no family photos, no evidence of a daughter. Nothing, I laughed nervously. Weird dream, I muttered. It had to be. What else could it have been? I started making coffee. That day, I presented my project to management. They loved it. The weeks of long shifts were finally over, at least temporarily. I should have been relieved. I was. I convinced myself that the strange dream had been caused by exhaustion. On the way home, I stopped at a store and bought junk food to celebrate. Chips, cookies, frozen pizza, ice cream. Nothing healthy. I carried the grocery bag to my front door. Marcus barked happily the moment I entered. Then another voice rang out. "Daddy, you're home." My entire body became rigid. The voice was high-pitched. Young, I slowly turned. A little blonde girl came skipping toward me. She could not have been older than 6. She wrapped both arms around my legs. "I missed you so much." Her hug felt wrong. Cold again. Stiff, but my body reacted as though this was completely normal. She pulled away. "Did you have a good day?" My day was great. I stared at her. Her eyes moved to the grocery bag. "What's that?" Before I could stop her, she grabbed it. I looked inside. Every item I had purchased was gone.